Let's face it, you're busy. You want to get your head around something interesting, maybe something insightful, but wading through tons of research.
Yeah, not exactly how most people want to spend their time.
Exactly. So that's what we do. We do the deep dive for you. And today, we're cracking open a method from psychotherapy research. It's all about understanding those, recurring patterns in our relationships, kind of like getting the decoder ring for why we keep having the same arguments or dynamics.
Right. We're diving into the Core Conflictual Relationship Theme method. CCRT for short.
CCRT.
Got it.
And you know how in therapy people talk a lot about relationships, past and present?
Sure.
Well, the CCRT gives researchers a really systematic way to look at those stories, to find the central repeating conflicts that pop up again and again in what people share.
And we're going right to the source material here, aren't we?
We are. A Guide to the CCRT Method by Lester Luborsky. It's really the foundational text, lays out the nuts and bolts. Okay, so what's our mission for today then? What are we hoping people take away?
Well, the goal is really to shed some light on the two main stages of this method. First, how researchers actually pinpoint these relationship episodes in a therapy session transcript.
Okay, finding the stories.
Exactly. And second, how they then take those stories and extract the core conflictual theme.
Yeah.
It's kind of like getting a peek behind the curtain, Seeing how the science of relationship patterns actually works.
And understanding these themes, I assume, helps the therapist.
Absolutely. It helps them zero in on the root of a patient's difficulties in relationships, hopefully helping them break those repetitive, often unsatisfying cycles.
Okay, makes sense. So let's unpack that first phase. Finding these relationship episodes. What exactly counts as one? What are we looking for?
So a relationship episode, or R, it's a specific chunk of a therapy session. It's where the patient is explicitly telling a story about a relationship.
With someone else?
Usually, yeah. Or sometimes even with themselves. Now, the whole session might feel narrative, right?
Yeah.
But we're looking for these distinct stories about an interaction.
Right, not just like, I feel anxious today. More like, I felt anxious when this happened.
Precisely. It needs to be a recounted event. And there's some key things researchers look for. First, there has to be a main other person you can identify.
Like a parent, a spouse.
Exactly. Parents, partners, friends, bosses, even the therapist sometimes. Or be a group like my family or my colleagues.
Okay. But not, say, their relationship with their car.
No. Generally, inanimate objects don't count here. The focus is interpersonal.
Got it. So a main person or group, what else makes it an RE?
They usually have a kind of narrative shape, a beginning, a middle, and end, like a mini story.
Makes sense.
And often the patient signals they're starting one. There might be a pause, or they'll shift topic, or say something direct like, anyway, I remember this other time, or so I was talking to my sister and...
Little verbal cues, like flags saying, story coming up.
Exactly. Or sometimes they'll introduce it as an example, like, I always feel undermined. Like, for example, yesterday at work, that whole intro, for example, that's part of the RE too.
Ah, okay. So even the wind-up is included. Now, practically speaking, how do they mark these in the transcripts? Must get confusing otherwise.
It's actually pretty straightforward visually. They draw a continuous line down the left margin of the transcript, right alongside the text of the RE.
The whole episode?
It's the whole thing, yeah. From the very start, including those introductory bits, to the end of the story. And at the top of that line, they write the RE number, they keep them in order, and who the main other person is for that specific story.
So RE3, mother, RE4, boss, something like that.
Exactly. It makes it really clear for anyone looking at it later. You see the line, you know it's an RE, who it's about, and where it fits in the session.
That visual marker sounds really helpful. You mentioned different types of other persons. We've got the usual suspects, but what about the less obvious ones?
Right. So the most common is RE other people. Pretty self-explanatory. But then there's RE therapist, which is interesting.
How so?
It splits into two types. First, there's the narrative type. That's just like any other RE, but the story is about an interaction the patient had with the therapist, maybe last session or earlier.
So the therapist becomes a character in the patient's story.
Precisely. But the second type, enactment, is even more direct.
Enactment?
Yeah. This is where the patient expresses that conflictual interaction with the therapist right there during the session. The therapist isn't just being talked about, they're part of the episode happening live.
Wow. So the therapy room itself becomes the stage for the pattern.
Kind of, yeah. It's a much more immediate way to see things play out. The guide gives this example of a Mr. T dodge.
What happens?
He asks the therapist, pretty directly, "Would you please mail the bill to my father?" And the therapist says, "No, it's meant for you."
Oh, setting a boundary.
Right. And Mr. Dodge keeps pushing, trying to get the therapist to send it to his father, and the therapist keeps saying no, explaining, "Your father isn't the patient." Eventually, Mr. Dodge says, kind of frustrated, "It's unfair to make me do that."
So you see the request, the refusal, the patient's reaction, all unfolding right there.
Exactly. It's a live demonstration of a potential relationship dynamic.
That's powerful. What about the RE self category? How does that work?
That one's a bit different. It's about interactions with oneself. Not just describing yourself like, "I'm shy." It's more like recounting a specific instance of interacting with your own thoughts or feelings.
Like an internal conflict or dialogue.
Yeah, or self-regulation, maybe. The guide uses Miss Craft as an example.
Right.
She says something like, "I don't like people to hem me in, and once I remember I backed myself into a corner and it happened this way." That phrase, "once I remember I backed myself into a corner," signals a specific interaction with the self.
Okay, so it's a discrete internal event being narrated, not just general self-talk.
Exactly. There's also this distinction between current and past Rice.
How's that defined?
Current is stuff happening right in the session or very recently, like the last few weeks. Past is everything else. And for past events, they note the patient's age at the time.
Ah, because childhood patterns might look different from adult ones.
Right. Context matters. Now, another key thing is that not all these stories are equally useful. Some are just too brief or vague.
So how do they decide what makes the cut? Is there a quality check?
There is. It's about the completeness of the narrative. Judges rate each RE on a 1 to 5 scale. 5 is super detailed, 1 is barely anything.
And there's the threshold?
Yeah, generally the cutoff is a mean rating of 2.5 from the judges. Anything below that usually gets excluded from the main CCRT analysis.
Okay, 2.5. What makes an RE complete enough to hit that mark? What are they looking for?
They're looking for specifics about the interaction. What was actually said or done? What did the patient want or intend? The wish. How did the other person respond? Response from other. How did the patient react or feel? Response of self. What was the outcome?
So the more of those W, RO, RS components are clearly described, the higher the rating.
Exactly. Specific events are much better than just general statements. An RE scoring below 2.5 often makes it too hard to reliably identify those CCRT components.
But they say it's usually okay to exclude those really sparse ones. Doesn't skew the results.
Apparently not significantly. There are usually enough richer episodes to work with, and minor things, like if the beginning or end is a bit fuzzy, that doesn't automatically disqualify an RE.
What if someone starts a story, stops, and picks it up later?
They link it together, it's scored as one unit. Same if it's a really long story, they might break it into subsections for easier handling, but it's still considered one RE overall.
Could you give us a sense of what those ratings look like? Like what's 1.0 versus a 2.5 versus higher?
Sure, a 1.0 might be just, saw my friend. Almost nothing there.
Right.
A 1.5, saw my friend, she seemed off. A tiny bit more, but still vague.
Okay.
A 2.0, saw my friend, she seemed off. Usually we have a good chat.
Hints of a wish to connect, maybe, but very general.
And the crucial 2.5.
Might be something like, saw my friend, she seemed off. Usually we have a good chat. I kind of hoped we could talk about my week, so I felt a bit let down when she was quiet. See? Now we have a possible wish to talk, connect. An RO seemed off quiet, and an RS felt let down. It's scoreable.
Ah, okay. Enough raw material.
Exactly. And higher ratings just add more detail, more specifics about the conversation, the feelings, the context. A 3.5 might detail why they wanted to talk, what off looked like specifically.
Yeah, it clarifies it nicely. You mentioned another example, Mr. B. Nevin, where even a skimpy RE gave clues.
Yeah, it was a brief mention about wanting to take a drawing class.
Yeah.
He liked that the teacher seemed less focused on technique and more on helping students see.
Didn't sound very complete. Maybe a 1.5 or 2.0. Probably. But the researchers thought it was interesting. They speculated his interest might relate to his core issue trouble asserting himself against domination. Maybe this teacher felt safer, less likely to trigger that conflict.
Huh. So even brief moments can hint at deeper patterns sometimes.
It seems so. It shows the potential, even if it doesn't make the final CCRT count.
Okay. And the last bit about Phase A was using independent judges. Why split the task like that?
It's about reliability and efficiency, mostly. Having judges specialize in just finding and rating the REs means you can then have multiple CCRT judges score the same set of selected rated episodes.
Ah, so you get multiple eyes on the complex scoring part.
Right. Boosts reliability.
Yeah.
And it saves time finding REs' work, so separating it lets the CCRT scores focus just on the analysis part. Plus, agreement between the RE finding judges is usually pretty good, which builds confidence in that first step.
Okay, phase A, find the stories, check their quality. Now, phase B, digging into those stories to find the core conflictual relationship theme. This sounds like where the real interpretation happens.
Absolutely. This is where they systematically pull out the recurring patterns. It involves two main steps, which actually get repeated and refined.
Repeated?
Yeah. Step 1 is identifying the key components in each RE. Step 2 is summarizing those components across all the REs. Then you do step 1, re-identifying based on the first summary, and step 2 component re-summarizing for the final CCRT.
So it's iterative, you circle back. Sounds kind of complex.
It requires careful attention, definitely, like being a detective for relationship clues.
Okay, let's break it down. Step 1, identify the components. What are they actually looking for inside those REs?
Right. So the CCRT judge reads and rereads each chosen RE, and as they go, they underline thought units.
Thought units.
Basically, distinct phrases or sentences expressing a single idea, feeling, or intention related to the relationship in the story.
Highlighting the key bits.
Exactly. Then, for each underlined bit, they decide which of 3 CCRT components it represents. There's W, wishes, needs, or intentions.
W for wish.
Okay, RO, responses from others.
RO, response from other. Got it.
And RS, responses of the self.
RS, response to self. W, RO, RS.
Yeah. They then jot that code, W, RO, or RS, in the margin next to the underlined text, often with a little arrow pointing to the exact words.
So they're tagging the narrative.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned inferences involved here.
Yes, at 2 levels, really. First, there's identifying components that are stated pretty much directly by the patient, very close to the text.
Okay, the obvious stuff.
Then there's what they call moderately clear inference. This is for components that aren't explicitly said, but can be reasonably inferred from the context and what is said, marked with parentheses, like W. Finding the right balance there is key.
And the responses, RO and RS, get another layer, right? Positive or negative?
Correct. Both RO and RS are marked as positive P or negative N, and crucially, this is always from the patient's perspective.
Ah, not objectively positive or negative.
No, it's about how the patient experienced it in relation to their wish in that situation. The guide has a great example, Mrs. N. Iolanta. She expected her advisor to argue against her decision not to return to school full-time, but the advisor was supportive.
Sounds positive, objectively.
Objectively, yes, but Mrs. Iolanta felt disappointed. Maybe she unconsciously wanted the advisor to push back or persuade her. So, because the advisor's response didn't meet her underlying wish, it was scored as NRO, negative response from other.
Wow. Okay, so NRO because it didn't fit her wish, even though it seemed nice.
Exactly. And her disappointment was then NRS, negative response of self. It really highlights that subjective experience is paramount.
That's a critical distinction. Any other nuances for scoring responses?
They differentiate RO, what actually happened, from RO expected, what the patient anticipated or feared the other would do, even if they didn't.
Okay, expectations versus reality.
Kind of. And for RS, the response of self, they sometimes note if it was expressed outwardly or not expressed, just felt internally, like feeling angry, NRS, but not showing it. Not expert.
That could be useful for tracking therapy progress, maybe?
Yeah.
If someone starts expressing feelings more?
Potentially, yeah. So once all REs are coded like this, all the Ws, ROs, RSs, PNs, etc. are transferred onto a CCRT score sheet.
Okay, step 1, dissect and code each story. Then step 2, count components and formulate the CCRT. What's involved there?
Here, the judge looks at that score sheet, tallying up how often each specific type of W, RO, and RS appears across all the analyzed REs.
Looking for frequency.
Exactly. Based on what's most frequent, they start formulating a preliminary CCRT. They're looking for the dominant themes in each category. The most common wish, the most common response from others, the most common response of self.
And finding the wish is sometimes trickier.
The guide says formulating the wish often takes more interpretation, more inference compared to the RO and RS, which are often more concrete consequences described in the stories.
So they're asking, what does this person seem to want most often in relationships? How do others typically react? How do they typically feel or respond?
That's the essence of it, finding the most recurrent patterns. Not every single RE has to fit perfectly, but you're looking for the central tendency. That's the conflictual part, these recurring, often problematic dynamics.
And this relies on clinical judgment, not just number crunching.
Very much so. They call it needing moderate level of inference, and that wet gray software, the human brain, is essential here. It's a blend of systematic counting and clinical understanding.
Right, so after that initial formulation, we get to the steps. Step 1, re-identify components. What's that about?
Step 1 is basically going back to the transcripts and reviewing the initial step 1 coding, but with that preliminary CCRT formulation in mind.
Looking again through the lens of the potential pattern.
Exactly. Knowing the possible main themes might make the judge notice a subtle component they missed the first time, or maybe reclassify something slightly differently now that they see the bigger picture. Any changes made here are marked clearly, usually in capital letters, to show they're from this second pass.
So it refines the initial coding based on emerging patterns. Makes sense. Which leads to step 2, recount and reformulate.
Right. Now the judge creates the final CCRT summary sheet. They list each component type again, ordered by frequency, but using the updated counts from step 1 thing.
So the most frequent wish, then the most frequent RO, then the most frequent RS.
Typically, yes. That forms the core CCRT statement. And they group similar components like feeling rejected and feeling ignored might become feeling dismissed, and their frequencies are added.
Grouping for clarity.
Yeah. And crucially, for every component listed on that summary sheet, they list the RE numbers where it appeared. Like for Mr. B. Nevin, a wish might be to not go along with wishes of others. RE347.
So you can trace it right back to the specific stories. That traceability seems really important.
It is. It grounds the final formulation directly in the patient's narratives.
Okay, let's dig into scoring those wishes, W, a bit more. You mentioned explicit versus inferred.
Right. Explicit W is directly stated, I wish, I want, I need. Pretty straightforward.
Marked just W.
Yep. Then the inferred wish, marked W in parentheses, is one that's not stated outright, but is inferred by looking across episodes. These are often seen as more central, more core to the conflict.
Because they show up more consistently, even if unstated.
Often, yes. And when formulating these, the guide says, don't make them more abstract than needed. Better to say, wish to be assertive if that fits the data, rather than something overly broad like wish for independence.
Keep it grounded in the narratives.
Right. And wishes can also be phrased in relation to the expected or experienced RO, like, I wish to assert myself without being dominated.
That connects the wish directly to the conflict. The guide had that table for Mr. B. Nevin illustrating inference levels. Can we revisit that quickly?
So in one RE, #1, he talked about fantasies of stepping on the other person. The explicit W was to assert self by putting the other guy down.
Okay, we're quite direct.
In another #4, he says clearly, I really don't want to get involved with her sexually, so W, to not get sexually involved. Simple.
Explicit denial.
Right. But looking across episodes, they inferred a broader W. To assert myself by not going along with the woman captures a theme of resisting control.
More general, inferred pattern.
Yeah, and interestingly, from that same denial about sex, they also inferred to get sexually involved, suggesting the denial itself pointed to an underlying conflict or ambivalence.
Wow, inferring the opposite based on the denial. That's deep.
It shows the level of interpretation involved sometimes. And then a simpler one, he says, I'm sort of hungry to have people around. That's just a clear W, to have people around.
Okay, that really clarifies the explicit versus inferred wish scoring. What about RO and RS scoring? You said that's generally more straightforward.
Generally, yeah, because there are often more direct consequences or reactions described in the Rs. They still get coded positive, negative from the patient's view, of course.
Right, subjective experience.
And the distinction between actual RO and RO expected remains important. And that optional expr versus not expr for the RS.
Expressed or not expressed. Got it. Any other key rules for scoring RO and RS?
A few important ones. RO response from others should only relate to the main other person identified for that RE.
Okay, stay focused on the main interaction.
RS response of self can include symptoms the patient mentions within the RE, like I got anxious or I felt depressed.
So symptoms count as RS.
If mentioned as part of the response in that episode, yes. And if the patient repeats the same type of response multiple times within one RE, like saying I felt relieved, then I felt the pressure lift, then It was such a relief.
Different words, same feeling.
Exactly. The judge notes each mention in the transcript, but on the summary sheet, that type of response, for example, relief, only counts once for that specific RE. You don't inflate the count just because they described it several ways. Mr. U Iron was the example there.
Right. Avoid double counting the same underlying response within one story. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, the guide mentioned optional steps, too, beyond these main ones, steps 3 to 6.
Yeah. Briefly, step 3 is rating the intensity of each component, WRORS, on a 1 to 5 scale, maybe relates to frequency. Step 4 is noting the sequence they appear in within each RE. Does W usually come first, then RO, then RS, or does it vary?
The typical interaction flow.
Kind of. Step 5 is specifically looking at the patient's experience of the CCRT with the therapist, using Gill and Hoffman's ideas about the therapeutic relationship itself.
Seeing the pattern play out in the room again.
Exactly. And step 6 involves using standard CCRT categories, predefined lists of common Ws, ROs, and RSs, instead of the tailor-made ones we've mostly discussed.
Why use standard ones?
For research, mainly. Allows easier comparison across different patients and studies. You can either translate your tailor-made ones into standard codes or just score directly using a standard list from the start.
So optional steps for deeper dives or broader research, and there were some final supplementary issues mentioned.
Right. Things like how to check the reliability of the tailor-made scoring using agreement judges or statistical methods, the importance of the judge having basic patient info, age, gender, context, how many REs you need, the sample size, aiming for maybe 10 per period, how to handle dreams and fantasies scored similarly but often analyzed separately, and crucially, the need for proper training for anyone doing this.
Clinical background, studying the manual, practice, feedback.
Exactly. It's a skilled process.
It really sounds like it. A remarkably thorough method for getting to the heart of these relationship patterns. Okay, so if we were to boil it all down, just recap the 2 absolute core phases we've explored today.
Sure. Phase A is essentially the groundwork. It's carefully finding and defining those relationship episodes, the specific stories within the therapy talk, and making sure they're detailed enough, complete enough for analysis.
Locating the raw material.
Exactly. Then Phase B is the analysis itself. Systematically identifying the key components within those stories, the wishes, responses from others, responses of self, and then figuring out which ones show up most frequently, most consistently across all the stories. That reveals the core conflictual relationship theme.
And the whole point is to get a structured, evidence-based handle on those underlying conflicts that just keep shaping how someone relates to others.
Precisely. It gives therapists and researchers a powerful lens based on the patient's own narratives to understand those core relational struggles.
You know, just learning about this method, it almost gives you a new filter for your own interactions. Thinking about, what am I typically hoping for? What reactions do I tend to get? What's my usual response?
It does highlight how intricate those patterns can be, doesn't it? And often, how repetitive.
Yeah, which kind of leads to a final thought for our listeners, maybe.
It does. If you were to look at your own interactions, your own relationship stories, through this kind of CCRT lens, what recurring themes do you think might emerge? What patterns might you start to notice?
Just something to ponder. No need for a score sheet.
Exactly. Just a little food for thought about our own relational worlds.